have not only seen isolated places, villages lost between mountains, towns surrounded by ice, communities hidden deep within forests. But Supai creates a completely different feeling. There is something about that abyss that seems to challenge modern logic itself. Miles away from any ordinary road, hidden between gigantic canyon walls that can rise more than 3,000 feet high, the village remains where the silence of the desert dominates everything around it. But what intrigues me most about Supai is not the isolation. It is the fact that, even in the face of extreme difficulty, the Havasupai people continue living there. Throughout this video, I will show you how the Havasupai people managed to survive for generations in one of the most inaccessible places in the United States. A story marked by expulsions, resistance, spirituality, and such a deep connection with nature that it almost feels impossible in the modern world. And once you understand what it truly means to live in Supai, you may never look at isolation the same way again. The most isolated village in the United States. A small village surrounded by gigantic walls of red rock, isolated from the rest of the United States in a way that almost seems impossible to exist in the 21st century. The first thing that impresses me about Supai is the silence. There is no road connecting the village to the outside world. No cars arrive there. No trucks cross the canyon bringing supplies. Everything that enters or leaves depends on narrow trails, helicopters, or long mule caravans crossing the desert. Whenever I watch videos of this place, I feel like I am looking at a community hidden between different eras. While American cities are surrounded by technology, traffic, and skyscrapers, Supai still functions like a territory separated from modern logic. Isolation shaped every detail of daily life. The village lies within the reservation of the Havasupai tribe, one of the best-known indigenous communities in the American Southwest. The name Havasupai means people of the blue-green waters, and all you need to do is see the rivers of the region to understand why. The waters have an almost surreal color, contrasting against the brutal dryness of the surrounding desert. Getting to Supai is not simple. The most common route requires a hike of approximately 8 miles down steep trails through the Grand Canyon. For hours, travelers cross dust, extreme heat, and towering canyon walls that seem to swallow every sign of civilization. There is something almost psychological about that descent. The deeper you go into the canyon, the farther away the rest of the world begins to feel. Phone signals disappear. The sound of cars disappears. Little by little, only the wind hitting the rocks and the echo of footsteps on the reddish sand remain. I find it fascinating how isolation completely transforms the perception of time. In Supai, a delivery may depend on a helicopter that arrives only on specific days. Mail can still be transported by mules. Even basic supplies must cross the canyon before reaching the village homes. And even so, the community remains alive, functioning daily as if it had created its own rules far away from the rest of the United States. Children play near the dirt trails. Residents talk in front of simple homes. Daily life unfolds, surrounded by one of the most extreme landscapes on Earth. The helicopter is practically the only fast connection to the outside world. It carries food, medicine, tools, and passengers. At times, it feels more like a survival service than ordinary transportation. When weather conditions become dangerous, Supai can become even more isolated. What is most surprising is that many people in the United States do not even know an entire community exists without roads. That completely contradicts the modern image of the country. Yet Supai remains there, hidden among the gigantic corridors of the Grand Canyon, like a place that escaped the rapid advance of the modern century. Tourism changed everything. For a long time, Supai remained hidden from most of the world. Very few people knew about that small territory, lost among gigantic canyon walls. The difficult access kept away occasional visitors, and the village continued following a quiet rhythm, far from international attention. The landscape seemed to exist only for those willing to face the long desert crossing. Then, the internet discovered the place. Photographs of the turquoise-blue waters started spreading across social media at an unbelievable speed. Within just a few years, images of Havasu Falls appeared in travel videos, adventure profiles, and pages dedicated to places considered surreal. What had once been almost unknown became a worldwide symbol of exotic nature. The impact was immediate. The number of visitors increased drastically, creating unprecedented pressure on the indigenous Havasupai tribe community. People from all over the world began competing for permits to enter the reservation, often months before the trip itself. The isolation that once protected the region suddenly attracted even more curiosity. The crystal-clear waters became the region's main postcard image. There is something almost artificial about that intense blue color, contrasting against the reddish canyon rocks. The waterfalls helped fuel the tourism phenomenon even further. Besides Havasu Falls, places like Mooney Falls and Beaver Falls began attracting adventurers searching for the perfect photograph. The problem is that every visitor also represents environmental pressure on an extremely delicate region. That was when the reservation began enforcing stricter rules. Visitor access became heavily controlled, with daily limits, intense monitoring, and specific regulations for camping, movement, and waste disposal. Anyone entering the territory quickly understands they are not stepping into an ordinary tourist park. Environmental preservation became an absolute priority. The local ecosystem depends directly on the purity of the water and the natural balance of the canyon. An uncontrolled flow of tourists could rapidly destroy the very thing that made Supai famous. The community realized early on that excessive popularity could become a threat. There is also one detail many people ignore while watching paradise-like videos of the area. The landscape is extremely vulnerable. Flash floods have devastated parts of the region many times throughout history. Storms can transform calm streams into violent currents capable of destroying trails, bridges, and camping areas within just a few hours. Some of these floods became permanently etched into the memories of the residents. The force of the water altered natural pathways, destroyed structures, and forced emergency evacuations. The contrast is astonishing. During much of the year, the environment appears calm and almost untouched, but a sudden weather change is enough for the canyon to reveal its brutal side.
All I know is it's gonna be a long night.
At the same time, tourism brought money to the local community. The reservation's economy became heavily dependent on visitors. This economic growth created a profound social transformation. A place once defined by extreme isolation suddenly began dealing daily with foreigners, social media influencers, and adventurers arriving from different countries. During certain times of the year, obtaining permission to visit the reservation became extremely difficult. Spots sell out quickly, and there is enormous demand from tourists trying to enter that hidden territory. It shows how a place that was once almost invisible to the world became an object of global fascination. Social media intensified this dilemma even further. Many people arrive at the canyon interested only in creating visual content. Some ignore basic rules, disrespect sacred areas, or treat the territory as nothing more than a backdrop for photographs. Over recent years, this has created growing tension between residents and visitors. The Havasupai community tries to balance hospitality with cultural protection. Tourism is financially important, but there is an invisible boundary they do not want to cross. The territory carries spiritual, historical, and ancestral meaning for the residents. It is not simply a tourist destination hidden in Arizona. In the end, Supai seems to exist permanently between two paths. On one side lies the economic necessity of welcoming visitors. On the other, the effort to protect traditions, territory, and cultural identity against increasingly intense tourism. And perhaps that is the village's greatest challenge, continuing to exist without allowing its own success to destroy its essence. The Havasupai people and their ancient history. When I first heard about the Havasupai people, I did not think about tourism, famous hiking trails, or photographs of unbelievably blue waters spreading across the internet. I thought about resilience, because any people capable of surviving within one of the harshest environments in North America carries a kind of wisdom that entire modern cities have already forgotten. Whenever I look at maps of Arizona, I feel like the scale is misleading. The Grand Canyon is often treated like a tourist landscape, almost like a geological monument disconnected from human life. But long before helicopters flew over that region, and before the trails became destinations for adventurers, people were already living there, farming there, raising children there, burying their dead there. The Havasupai occupy an area associated with the western side of the Grand Canyon in extremely isolated regions. For centuries, the isolation was not accidental. It was an unavoidable condition created by geography, gigantic cliffs, brutal temperatures, scarce rainfall, and long distances formed an environment where survival required a complete relationship with nature. There was no room for waste. The first thing that stands out to me in their history is their ability to understand the cycles of the desert. Urban societies usually see deserts as empty places. The Havasupai never saw them that way. To them, the canyon was alive. Every water source carried meaning. Every climate shift changed the rhythm of the community. Every season altered movement patterns. During part of the year, family groups moved to higher plateau regions to hunt and gather food. During other seasons, they returned to the canyon floor, where permanent water sources made agriculture possible. This seasonal movement was a sophisticated human system developed without industrial technology. Corn, beans, squash, and other crops depended on deep knowledge of the soil and the occasional flooding cycles. And I find it remarkable how almost nobody talks about this when Native American history is discussed. Their spiritual relationship with the territory comes directly from that profound dependence. In many indigenous traditions across North America, the land does not belong to people. People belong to the land. That difference changes everything, because there is no separation between cultural identity and physical territory. When European colonizers arrived in the Americas, bringing concepts of private property, rigid borders, and economic exploitation of the land, many native peoples entered direct conflict with a completely different worldview. In 1975, something extremely important happened. After decades of legal struggles, the Havasupai regained a significant portion of their ancestral lands through federal legislation. That restoration did not erase the historical losses, but it represented a rare victory within the history of indigenous peoples in the United States. The dangerous journey to Supai is a real challenge. The path to Supai is not merely access to the village. It becomes a true physical and psychological journey through the heart of the Arizona desert. Even before sunrise, dozens of visitors position themselves along the canyon rim, trying to escape the most brutal temperatures of the day. The initial silence can be deceptive. Only a few hours later, the dry air begins burning the throat. The heat reflects off the rock walls, and every mile feels longer than the last. No vehicles cross the route. Everything depends on human endurance against an arid and monumental landscape. As the sun climbs higher, the hike stops feeling like tourism and begins to resemble an expedition through hostile territory. The first descents into the canyon create a mixture of fascination and tension. The trail winds between gigantic canyon walls, carved over millions of years by erosion. In many sections, the terrain shifts between soft sand, loose rocks, and narrow turns surrounded by steep drop-offs. Heavy backpacks increase the physical exhaustion even more, especially for those carrying tents, water, camera equipment, and supplies for several days. Many tourists stop constantly to catch their breath, while staring at the immense reddish landscape surrounding them. The feeling is one of traveling deeper and deeper into a place isolated from the rest of the world. The farther visitors advance, the smaller their connection to modern civilization seems to become. The Arizona heat quickly transforms into one of the greatest challenges of the journey. During certain times of the year, temperatures easily climb beyond levels considered dangerous for prolonged outdoor activity. The hot ground radiates heat continuously, creating a suffocating sensation that follows every step. Water begins to be calculated almost like vital fuel. Many hikers must constantly monitor signs of dizziness, fatigue and headaches, classic symptoms of severe dehydration. Rescue teams in the region frequently warn unprepared tourists about the trail's extreme dangers. In such a dry environment, small mistakes can rapidly turn into serious situations. Along the route, scenes emerge that reinforce the human dimension of this adventure. People covered in dust rest beneath small patches of improvised shade beside the rocks, while others move slowly, guiding mules loaded with luggage and supplies. Some visitors already appear exhausted before even reaching halfway through the trail. The weight of the equipment seems to increase with every steep incline climbed beneath the relentless sun. Worn boots, sweat-soaked clothing, and reddened faces reveal the physical toll caused by the crossing. In certain sections, the silence is broken only by the sound of footsteps crunching over gravel and the heavy breathing of hikers. Everything contributes to creating an atmosphere of absolute isolation. The most difficult crossings appear when the terrain begins to change near the water-cut sections of the canyon. Small streams must be crossed repeatedly, forcing tourists to balance their backpacks while searching for stable footing among slippery rocks. During rainy periods, parts of the trail can become dangerous because of the sudden flash floods typical of the Grand Canyon. Some people need to stop for long periods, simply to regain enough energy to continue moving forward. The accumulated distance begins affecting not only the body, but also the emotional state of the visitors. Mental exhaustion grows as the landscape appears endless. The idea that an entire village exists hidden somewhere inside that maze of rock begins to feel almost surreal. After hours of walking through relentless heat and constant exhaustion, many tourists describe a profound psychological shift during the final approach to Supai. The absence of roads, cities, and urban noise creates a rare sensation of complete disconnection from the modern world. Some report anxiety caused by the extreme isolation, while others describe the experience as almost spiritual. Time itself seems to slow down inside the canyon. Every turn in the trail increases the anticipation of finally finding signs of the Havasupai community. When the first denser trees appear and the distant sound of running water can finally be heard, the emotional contrast becomes enormous. After crossing such a brutal and silent environment, the existence of a hidden village within that landscape feels almost impossible to believe.